Bruin. My name is Celia Stansel. I live in Ravenville, Georgia, but originally I'm from Franklin, North Carolina. I lived there before I got married, and I have property in Macon County. I pay taxes. I'm married to Walter Stansel. My son is Phil Stansel. And I would like to tell you what happened to us on February 19th. Me and my husband were sitting in our living room when all of a sudden 20 trucks drove up with armed men, guns, bulletproof vests. They ran up on our porch. We went to the door, and they proceeded to tell me and my husband that he was arrested for all kinds of violations which were not true. They came into our house. 2 lady wildlife agents took me away from my husband. They patted me down, searched me. I was not under arrest. Why did they do that to me? They patted me down. They saw my pocketbook sitting on the table. They picked it up and they said, "We're going to take everything out of your pocketbook." They sat there and they took everything out of my purse, laid it on the table. I said, "What are you looking for?" They said, "SD cards." I said, "SD cards? I don't carry SD cards in my pocketbook." They ran all over the house. They took out an album. They were in my pictures. They looked at all my pictures. They went through drawers. Everything they could do. They searched everywhere in our house. They treated us like hardened criminals. There was even a helicopter hovering over our house. And my husband had a stroke several years back, and he has a bad back and back knees, and we're both 60. I'm 67 now, and I was 65 then. But they treated us like we were murderers, I guess you'd say. They tried to keep us from running away. They kept on, they did checks on my computer, which my husband does not even know how to turn on. They proceeded to run all over our house, and I don't know how long it went on, for hours. I guess I just praise the Lord every day for letting me live through this, because it's the worst thing I've ever been through in my life, ever. It don't matter. No, anything that's ever happened to me, that is the worst. And I just thank Him, because I don't know how I made it, but I did. They wouldn't even let me go to the bathroom without one following me, and I was so thirsty and I wanted some water, and they wouldn't let me get water. They said, "We'll get it for you." They wouldn't let me go to the refrigerator to even get water. And my husband and I have been stressed out by this, and it's been hard on his health, and he's not in good health anyway. He has sugar, he's had that stroke, he's high blood pressure. I have high blood pressure. We both take lots of medicine. But while they were at our house, they went to my son's house, and he was not there, and him and his wife arrived home while they were there, and they didn't even give him a chance to go in his house. They jerked him and hauled him off to jail and left her there with 15 wildlife agents by herself, with all them men, no lady wildlife officers. My little grandson was not there, thankfully, because he would have been so scared. He is now scared to death when he sees a gang warden or a law officer or anybody, and he's just terrified. And he says, "Papa, will we ever get to go bear hunting again?" And I am blessed to have a wonderful son who doesn't deserve what they did to him. He has been an ordained deacon for 10 years. He's a pastor of Black Mountain Baptist Church in Franklin, North Carolina, and he does not deserve what they did to him. He has never given me any trouble. He's never even had a speeding ticket. After going to court in Franklin, North Carolina, the state dropped all charges. Then in June, they brought federal charges against them. because of a bear that was killed by undercover agent Chad Arnold, Officer of the Year, may I add. He should be the poacher of the year in my book. Am I wrong or not? Are they not supposed to protect wildlife instead of kill them to entrap people? Chad Arnold was alone when he killed bear. My husband was not with him. My son was not with him. He called them and asked them to come and help him find that bear and take him down to the place where he was staying in Georgia. They did, and then the next day, loaded that bear up, took it over in North Carolina, tagging it illegally, and then charged my husband and my son with the Lacey Act. He was the one that hauled that bear into North Carolina out of Georgia. He was by himself. My son did not even know where he was going with the bear. My husband did not know where he was going with the bear. He did it by himself. They were told to come to Asheville and turn themselves in. In Asheville, they drove themselves to the Forest Service in Asheville, and there, the Forest Service, Brian Southard's, Chad Arnold's buddy, I guess, they arrested him, excuse me. They put them in chains and shackles and took them to the federal courthouse and charged them federally for this bear that Chad Arnold killed in Georgia by himself, hauled into North Carolina by himself. They put them in shackles and chains and charged them federally with this. Do people, and after, when they did, this judge, chief magistrate in Asheville, Judge Howell, he put them on pretrial probation. They had not had a trial. They had not been convicted of anything. He put them on pretrial probation. They couldn't have a gun in the house. They took their passport. And is this not America? I thought you were innocent until proven guilty. And I would like to know just how much a bear is worth to spend over $2 million just in North Carolina. Apparently, they are worth a lot when an undercover agent kills them. Chad Arnold and Brian Southers, I do not know who gave them permission to hatch this scheme up for him to kill that bear and charge my husband with it. But I would like to know. And also, my husband was with Chad Arnold a couple of days earlier. He was hunting with Jerry Parker. And when he killed that bear cub that day, later on my husband saw him that day. And he said, "What happened to that bear you were running?" He said, "I missed it." He is known to lie. He has been caught lying on the witness stand. In fact, I have seen him lie on the witness stand in Asheville. Him and Brian Southers both told lies about my husband. I watched them lie. Is that what an officer is supposed to do? Tell lies to get somebody else convicted of crimes? I pray no family ever has to go through what I've been for the last 2 years. It's been terrible. And also, a friend of ours, Jack Billingsley, Jack Billingsley had to go through they went to his home when they went to ours with all the helicopters, the guns, tore his house off, police charged him with state charges. Then 2 or 3 days they came back and arrested him again. They came back the second time and got him and drove him off to jail, charged him with federal charges of being a bear hunting guy. He was charged with killing bears the first time. He has never killed a bear in his life. He never carries a gun. He's tripped during bear season, and he's not even able to get out in the woods and guide a bear hunt because his legs are bad and they charged him falsely and then dropped all the charges after he spent $7,000 on lawyers. They dropped everything. Well, my husband and I have been stressed mentally and financially by this, and I would say, even though we spent thousands and thousands of dollars, that the mental stress is worse than the financial. It's just been terrible, and I just would ask you to pray for us and pray for all these people. We've just had a terrible time, and I just want to thank y'all for letting me come today and tell this. And I just pray that no other family will have to go through what we've been through. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stansel. Next, we're going to hear from Jerry Parker.
Thank you for your time. My name is Jerry Parker. I'm a member of the Eastern Band of Turkeyans. I'm involved in this operation, something Bruin operation. I've been detained in it for approximately 22 months. We've been on federal probation. We can't leave or nothing without checking our probation officer. We've never been to court before it, but it all started on February the 19th. I have a cabin in Georgia, my main residence in North Carolina. And probably 30 of these wildlife officers came to my place in Georgia with helicopter, drug dogs, assault rifles, I don't know. But they met me at the door and they asked me my name, and I told them. They slammed me down on the deck, handcuffed me, and said, we need to do this the easy way or the hard way. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, if you'll tell them somebody, we'll help you. I said, the only thing I can tell you is call my lawyer or do what you got to do. They handcuffed me in my home, kept me there 12 hours, took me to jail at 2 o'clock next morning. They come 2 o'clock that day. They didn't give me a chance to take none of my medicine or nothing, just kept me rested there. And through this whole thing, they had to, like I say, the helicopter and all these people, you know, if they'd called any one of us, we'd turned ourselves into jail if they had something for us. But they took me to jail really on 1 charge of littering and 2 charges of letting my dogs run in Georgia. Put me under a $10,000 cash bond. And then I went to 3 different jails after that, in North Carolina and Ashton, over the same incident. And it all started, Chad Arnold called my place, wanted to go bear hunting. And I had a website, or my son and another boy had a website. I would help him a little bit hunting. And he come down there and paid me to go hunting. We hunt a day, he didn't find out the next day. We get up this small bear that keep talking about. And we run it all day, the dogs couldn't ever catch it. And at the end of the day, I called my son, he was working that day, to come over to help me retrieve the dogs. We couldn't ever get the bear. So just as he gets there, the dogs bay up again. I don't know if you're familiar with hunting, tree and band, but the dog was barking at the bear. He walks in the woods with Chad Arnold. He shoots the bear, kills him. And it's quiet. And the minute Chad Arnold called me on cell phone and said, I don't want to take this bear, it's too small. I don't think it's worth it. And I told him when he done that he killed the bear, he's responsible for tagging it. And he got that in his report, it's on in court. So he leaves the bear in the hole, he won't tag it, they come out. And he wants to continue hunting. He said he didn't think he got his money worth. So we hunt another day or 2, we can't find nothing. And a friend of mine had some bears eating in a cornfield. So I talked to him about it, and so he wants to go down there and hunt the bears in the cornfield. So he goes into Georgia or North Carolina. I don't know for sure if it's in North Carolina or Georgia where he hunted, but he hunts another day, kills another bear. And he won't tag that bear. He calls this other guy to come help him look. They brought it to my place. I helped him skin it. He cuts it up. He hauls it to North Carolina. I don't worry with it. I wasn't even married the day he left. And then he charges us with committing the Lacey Act from transporting a bear from one state to the other. He hauled the bear. He killed the bear. And, you know, I didn't know what he knew. If he had, I don't reckon he even had a hunting license to hunt in Georgia if he was hunting in Georgia. But this whole thing, it's just been, I don't know what they were looking for. I mean, he hunts weed there too. If they get found wrong, they create a crime to have something to charge it with. And it's cost us thousands of dollars, and we've just been on, you might as well say house arrest for 2 years, 22 months. But we couldn't go and work that list. They took our passport, all our gun rights, everything, just on that pre-trial. condition. But this has happened to countless people in this courtroom that probably won't talk, that went to jail strictly over nothing. There's no basis for this whole deal that I can see. I mean, I'm not no lawyer and I'm not a great talker, but as far as I'm concerned, they could got more out of it, catching a bunch of fish. They ain't got no money, like I say. They drop all charges on us, and they recharge us, and they drop again. And they said that I've been a thorn in their side for 30 years or something, and they're just gonna get me in petty offenses in court. That the guy from Franklin, Southern, told my lawyer that. And it's just been a nightmare. I mean, you can really understand what's happened to everybody, but I just hope something is done about this. It may save somebody else. Like I say, I fought for my country. Now I'm ended up fighting my country to stay alive. But it's it's totally wrong, this whole thing. Anybody in this courtroom, they can call and they come turn themselves in any jail here. They come down with 30 officers, helicopters, drug dogs, just put on a show for the public. As far as I know, I don't know what happened. It's just out of hand. And Mr. Arnold, he's killed stuff in every state. Not tagged it. That's the only case they got for what he's done. I'm not killed a bear in 20 years. I don't even care about killing a bear. I like to run my dogs and hunt. That's the only reason I hunt. Just to train dogs. I don't even own a dog now. I quit. If they want me out, I'm done. But it ain't worth it. Just destroy your whole life. I'd like again, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Next, we're going to hear from Alan Stockton.
That was time I just had gotten here. I was in court actually on some of these matters over in Asheville just earlier this morning. Operation Something Bruin, I've had the privilege of representing several different people on both sides of Georgia, North Carolina state line. Candidly, the operation as a whole has been a complete failure. And I say that for several reasons. Number one, the financial resources that were put into that operation, I know you're not doing it to make money or to break even, but there was just an immense amount of financial resources placed into this operation, and there's not been the return on that. But the main reason it's been a failure, and I hope this is not lost on anybody, but this Operation Something Bruin did not accomplish what it was set out to do. And that was to keep people from, to investigate instances of people trafficking in bear parts and stuff like that. There was not one instance in any of this where there was any trafficking of bear gallbladders or anything like that. There was just nothing of the sort. There was an operation similar to this back in, I think, the late 80s, where that was an issue and that was a problem. There was, basically they went out and tempted and created the crimes, and in most instances committed the crimes that actually occurred. There was a young lady I represented in Georgia. She was dating a fella who, I think I saw him here, he may have spoke already, but she literally was just in the vehicle with him, and there was no overt crimes committed at any time she was with him, but she was charged with these crimes. And the people charging her for something that happened in Georgia was your North Carolina officer, Chad Arnold, and a North Carolina U.S. Forest Service officer, Brian Southern. And what they were doing in the state of Georgia without prior permission, without prior clearance of local law enforcement, is riding around, providing alcohol to the person that they were giving the gun to, and shooting deer at night. I think there were 4 deer taken at night. 3 of them were taken by the law enforcement officers from another state. It's not, by the same token, Georgia's not really wiping this either, because we had our officers up here basically creating and committing crimes in your state as well. It's just not been a wise allocation of resources by any means, and it's been an overstepping of bounds. I know there were cases where they claimed that this operation had to take place because of all these existing criminal acts that were going on that they were aware of. But I know in one case in particular, I won't mention the names, they just showed up, cold called, and basically went to a local, right here in this area, to a local store, said, we'd like to get them bear hunting. Who bear hunts? Well, this person does. So they go over there and meet that person, and then over a period of years gain confidence, and it was no prior knowledge. It wasn't a situation where they were trying to, eliminate some ongoing crimes. This person was not on their radar in any means whatsoever. But out of all the people that I think that originally was claimed it was 90-something arrests, but I think it really wound up being around 50-something when the numbers shook out. Before this happened, I know on the Georgia side of it, there were pre-prepared video press releases that hit the internet right after the arrests and takedowns were all taken. It's just, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I do other stuff, but I do a lot of criminal defense work. I've got a client on death row right now. I've represented people in major drug operations. I've never seen the resources put into something that were put into this. And the sad part is the crimes, at least in my cases, the crimes that were being prosecuted were crimes that the officers themselves committed, and the people being charged were charged, in effect, with allowing it to happen or not objecting to it happening. Nobody's necessarily lily white in this, but the actual crimes being committed, by and large, in Operation Something Bruin, were committed by law enforcement officers. And like I say, they were just charging the people with them for being along for the ride, for lack of a better word. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have. Like I said, I just walked in on this. I don't know if I've plowed any of the same ground that was plowed before. But this is something that I hope Georgia will hold some similar hearings as well, because our officers should not have been up here doing what they were doing in North Carolina, killing your animals, breaking your laws. My former law partner is now our district attorney in Raven County, just across the line. There was no pre-clearance for the bear that your officer killed in Georgia. Hunting illegal, doing something illegally in the state of Georgia. I'm not aware of any pre-clearance for the deer that were shot in Georgia at night with spotlights. It's just been, basically, they've been an entity of their own. They've just been free-ranging. Somebody said it best, these officers basically got to go on safari at the taxpayers' expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stockton. At this point, I'm going to see if any members of the committee would like to ask any questions of any of the previous speakers. And I'd like to start with Representative Mike Hager. Representative Hager, do you have any questions for any of those that have spoken? Any questions for staff?
Unfortunately, I've got about 4 pages. I'll try to hold it as quick as I can. So, well, first I want to recognize Representative West for having us out here. Representative West, thank you for doing this. It's a beautiful area. I'm not from far from here, so I enjoy the mountains every chance I get. The question I have is for the attorneys and you guys, the 3 down here. You talked about 50 arrests were made. Out of those 50 arrests, how many were in North Carolina, how many were in Georgia, do you know?
I think the majority of North Carolina. There were, I think, Eric and I had clients who were North Carolina and Georgia. I'm going to say the total in Georgia were 4 or 5. Well, there may have been 6 at the most in Georgia. The remainder were in North Carolina. Yeah, 6 at most.
When you look at the Parker case, if y'all can get the files, basically involved 4 different defendants, Jerry Parker, Brock Parker, Maul, and Gail Pencil. And they violated on both sides of the line. I think Mr. Thomas and Wayne, Mr. Stockton mentioned before, were also charged with the deer poaching ring thing that the officer engaged in. That was in Georgia. I'd say out of that, 90% of them were in North Carolina.
That's okay. Of the ones that were in North Carolina, how many of those charges resulted in major issues with deer poaching and trafficking in bear poaching, trafficking in parks and those things, of what you would consider a serious nature, not a misdemeanor issue?
That resulted in that?
Yes, sir.
0.
And when you think about that, you have to think of this term. Out of those 50, 10 went to federal court. The rest of them were dealt with in state court. And I think Mr. McClain, he had to leave, but I think there were 2 convictions out of those 40 in state court. All the rest of them were either dismissed after trial or dismissed by the judge or DA way before trial. And every state court judge that we went in front of, basically, to reaffirm what Mr. McClain said, had unchoice words for this cluster mess, and there's no merit to it. And so,
And I represent Rutherford and Burke County. Part of my responsibility is to protect our citizens. Number one, that's, I think, every representative up here feels like our constituents are. We're there to protect them, sometimes from other people, sometimes from our own government. And so the question I ask is that more out of ignorance than anything, is it customary, and maybe the wildlife animal folks, I'll get that in later, but is it, from your point, is it customary to have Georgia wildlife officers up in North Carolina and vice versa? Is that customary? I don't know that, just been
it's not customary. There's a specific statute I don't have in front of me in North Carolina where you have a special officer designated through the Wildlife Resource Commission before they can even engage in undercover activity. And then you have to have a written agreement, that's what Mr. McClain was talking about before, between this state and the state of Georgia through its resource commissions before any officer can even come from North Carolina and go into Georgia. Georgia has to approve it, give written authorization. All these things, the agreement Mr. McClain is talking about, occurred after these men had done switch stateside. The agreement never was put into effect until February 2012. We're talking about deer poaching stuff that happened before that, bear poaching that happened before that. There was no written authorization, even under our law, where we require a written consent between us and Georgia before their officers can come here. That never happened. So there is a mechanism by which they can do it. They just didn't follow it in this case. And none of the DA here had no prior understanding of it. Nobody with, I guess, local law enforcement other than outside the Wildlife Resource Commission. Usually those things won't happen. What would have happened if they caught Officer Webb up here from Georgia poaching? They could take him to jail, all that. Local deputy or county deputy wouldn't have had any idea what was going on with these men and would have frustrated the whole investigation. I mean, if they were legitimately investigating a true bunch of criminals, there was no inner law enforcement operations, even with our state officers, state departments, sheriff, state patrol, Wildlife Resource Commission. All the other branches didn't have any clue that there was an officer from Georgia up here breaking the law.
So you're telling me that if the city representative, any of us up here could say, listen, show me the documentation to where the prior approvals were in place before this issue happened, I should be able to see one.
Yes, sir. You should, by our laws, yes, sir, it should be there. And I'll be glad to get y'all any of that stuff that we've gotten. U.S. Attorney gave us a copy that was unsigned by the state of North Carolina, and then a month or so later, we get Colonel Davin's signature on one that was different than what the U.S. Attorney gave us. And it was, like I say, supposedly this started back in 2009. This was in 2012, before anybody signed a piece of paper under our law or even federal law to authorize this investigation.
Be okay is if you're investigating somebody in an undercover capacity and illegal conduct's taking place on both sides in 2 different jurisdictions, you would get some kind of pre-clearance for something like that. Or in a light most favorable to the government, that may have happened in some instances. But overall, like on our officer, Mr. Webb, that was up here in North Carolina, I don't think there was any tie to Georgia. He was not investigating anything with Georgia. And on the issue with Mr. Thomas down in like Cleveland, the White County area down in Georgia, there was no tie whatsoever to North Carolina. It wasn't part of this. It was just they were just casting a broad net and going wherever they chose without regard to any boundaries or jurisdictions.
And the testimony that came out in court, and that's another thing, nobody has accepted responsibility for this car bag. You ask the feds whose it was, well, it was a state state-initiated investigation. You have state officers who's initiating, who started this thing. Oh, it was the Fed. An example was Elliot Hooper's case over in Macon County. I requested discovery from the state, find out what they charged my guy with, what the elements were. Nobody would give it to me. DA said he didn't have it, so I subpoenaed Officer Arnold and everything he had on my client. I subpoenaed Bruin Southern from U.S. Forest Service, everything he had on my client. We get to court, Wildlife Resource Commission, and a lady, one of their attorneys from Raleigh, to represent the game warden because of my subpoena. We get to court, and Judge Richard Hope, who's been a judge for 30 years, retired now, looks at the state DA and says, what are we going to do? The DA says, well, the feds say, they can't give us the information. The state says, or the wildlife says, oh, the feds won't give it to them. Nobody has any evidence here. Judge Hope said, listen, dismiss. Get this out of my courtroom. Nobody accepted this thing. Well, I still don't know, after 2 years, 2.5 years, whatever it's been, of dealing with this, how this got started, whose authority it was overall under. The feds, Mark Meadows has attempted to have a special investigator appointed to the Solicitor General, and they concluded, oh, this was a state-initiated operation, so we can't really do anything to the federal officers. My understanding is that the state officers are saying, well, it's a federal investigation, so the state can't really do anything to the state officers. So they're both just passing the ball back and forth, and nobody wants to accept it.
The last question of the attorney says, okay, the federal charges that North Carolina citizens were charged with and taken into federal court, were those because of the Lacey issue or federal lands, one of the two? Is that what the way I understand it, right?
Both. My client, on the federal case we tried, along with Mr. Stiles and Mr. McLean, had some co-defendants there as well. My client was charged with violating a Georgia law in furtherance of a Lacey Act violation in North Carolina. So everything he was charged with doing happened in Georgia. And technically, I guess you could come up with that kind of a jurisdictional argument. But basically, that's what we were there for. And our situation was because of the alleged interstate transport of illegally taking wildlife. In Mr. Stiles and Mr. McLean's, it was basically the federal land issue.
In short of that, 85% of the cases that are involved in federal court, what you're just basically talking about, the two main cases, the Crisp case and the Parker case, were the federal land jurisdiction issues. But as it sits right now, any one of us on federal land, for anything the state says is against the law, the smallest crime in North Carolina, well, even your tag light not being on your tag of your vehicle, you can go to federal court, and Judge Dennis House, Magistrate Judge Dennis House event, you're going to go to federal prison because you violated the state law of a tag light being out on federal property. And that's why any of these guys that go to prison are going to go because that's how the feds treat their citizens. Like Chad Chris, he's got 20 months we've got on appeal right now. I'll shut up in a second, but one night, December 2010, a couple of them come go with him. He gives one of them a shotgun, or one of them has a shotgun or something. He gives him some buckshot. Cat didn't take a gun. They go out and walk around the woods with the dog for a little while. They didn't kill anything. They talk about, well, if we see a deer, we ought to shoot it. Okay? If we see a bear, we'll shoot it. Well, they didn't see anything. Well, he did do that, though, so we pled guilty to it. On those 4 charges, he got 20 months in federal prison. 2 charges of shining a spotlight in the search of game. 1 shining for a bear, 1 shining for a deer. A handheld flashlight that he shined up basically around the lake on foot, walking around, and then seeing if they saw a bear, they would shoot it. Seeing if he saw a deer, he would shoot it, or they would shoot it. He got 20 months in federal prison for that. That's what they're going to come down there to Raleigh when they have their chance to do this and say, oh, we got them, they're bad guys. No, it's not. They petty offenses. Think about that as simple as form. Petty. It's less than.
He's not saying it's a petty offense. It's actually called a petty offense under
So
the law.
that's what we're dealing with. That's their big wins. The thing to hang their hat on is something that a district court judge and federal court don't even consider. The magistrate deals with it. It's less than it's like getting your signal light being out in your car in North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I have a few more questions. I'll yield to anybody else before I finish my presentation.
I'd like to recognize folks at the other end of the table. Representative Dixon, Representative Waddell, Representative Martin. Like to take a shot at anybody? Representative Dixon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have a question, but I would like to make a comment. I've been in a few of these kinds of things that are highly charged and highly emotional over the years, and I'd like to point out to the chairs that how respectful this audience has been. After the first time of applauding, the chair asked this audience to refrain. And I have been amazed that you did that. And Mr. Chair, I'd just like to express my appreciation to this audience for the respect that they gave to you and instructing them on how you need to conduct this meeting. It's very unusual in highly charged issues, and I think we're before a group of very good, courteous, careful citizens of North Carolina and the United States of America. And you've got my attention. And I fully intend to ask the right questions of the right people at the right time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further discussion, further debate, Representative Waddell, Representative Martin.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make one comment. I'm not going to make the obvious comment that I did before. Being from the southeastern part of the state, we have our own group of hunters. I'm not a hunter myself, but I do share Representative Dixon's comments about the audience being really respectful. It is an eye-opening experience for me. I'm one of those guys that really likes to hear both sides of the story, and I'm sure that I'll get both sides of the story before it's all over with. But I do appreciate Representative West, Chairman West, inviting us up here to this, and I'm glad I came. It's really important, I think, to hear everybody's concerns and views, and I do know that in the state of North Carolina, we'll try to make it right.
Further discussion, further debate.
A brief comment. I just want to thank those of you who took the time to testify in front of our committee and to share some very troubling personal experiences. And I appreciate how you were able to organize your thoughts and put that out there in respect to our time and giving us some additional information. And clearly, it seems that personal rights were violated, and this is not the manner that we expect to be treated, and none of us expect to be treated in that way. So we will do the work that we can to make sure we get through that and can address that issue. So thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to follow up.
You recognize it.
I do want to mention the fact, too, that is it possible from the chair's standpoint that we get a copy of the comments that were made today?
Certainly, if any individual that has spoken that has pre-prepared written remarks, if you'd like to submit that with the committee clerk, that would be a great benefit to the committee for our committee records and any committee report that might come out.
Mr. Chair.
Recognize.
Mr. Chair, I do not know what the chair or anybody else has relative to the official documents concerning the something brewing, but I'm sure that the chair feels that the community needs to have all of that information from where we need to request it so that we can have a good understanding of when this started and all of the official details surrounding the something brewing circumstances, and if there's things that need to be subpoenaed in order to do that, I'm sure that the chair will do that also.
Most certainly. The other area of jurisdiction that this committee is dealing with concerns deer farming, and we had a previous committee about a month ago, a few weeks ago, and one speaker was not able to attend that committee. So at this point, I'd like to recognize Beverly Hampton, to come address the deer farming issue and, before we get back into the further discussion on something.
Good morning. I hope I don't take up too much more of your time. I'll try to be brief. But I'd like to commend you first on your willingness to talk to farmers and sportsmen alike. I understand, and we all understand, that it's not front page business. It doesn't put you in the shining light, but it's an in-depth issue nonetheless. My name is Beverly Hampton, like he's mentioned before, and I'm a student at North Carolina State University, and I've been actively involved in raising deer and elk for the past 21 years of my life, and I've been involved in raising over 1,000 head of animals related in the Cervidae family. And I'd like to share a situation from a family friend who couldn't be here today, Mr. Jared Allman, and it goes similar to the situations we already heard, the same mistreatment of people, not only people, but animals as well. And this goes back, and in those years of raising deer, most of my life has been on the sidelines of hearing about this mistreatment and being involved directly with my family's business and the like situations. And this goes beyond just 2 years ago or just a couple years ago. But back on December 1st, 2002, Mr. Allman received a phone call from a local wildlife officer interested to know if he had fallow deer, which are native to the Mediterranean areas of Europe, and wanted to know if he had any on his property. Mr. Allman did, and of course told him that he had 19 head, and the officer replied that he wanted to come out and take a look. Mr. Allman invited him to come on. On the 11th of December, a couple of wildlife officers and 2 local biologists showed up at their door and took pictures of his property, his animals, his infrastructure, things of that nature. And Mr. Allman asked what he was doing or what it was about, and he said that there was a new law coming out that may have any relation to this situation. What they were referring to was a permit required for captive cervidae, anything that has antlers and is two-toed, and moose, elk, deer, many species of exotic deer. And that law had been, or that permit had been required for several years, back in the 90s and before. But obviously it wasn't being enforced until now, until this situation. 2 days later, on December 13th, 2 wildlife officers approached his door and gave him a search and see warrant. But they were followed by 18 vehicles and 21 game warden, a federal officer, and several biologists, who then told him that they weren't going to just search and see his animals, but they were there to, within a matter of 10 minutes, kill all the deer on the property. Mr. Allman questioned if there would be any compensation for his animals. They were his livestock, his livelihood, his business, and they told him no, that they had the right to kill any deer they wished to in high fence here in North Carolina. They instructed him that if he didn't go ahead and use his key and open his gate, so they would just use bolt cutters and go right in. Once they saw his livestock, they questioned why Mr. Allman had told them he only had 19 deer, when obviously there was 30 in his fences. What they were referring to were black buck antelope. Black buck antelope are not in the Cervidae family. They have horns, not antlers. They're from India. So these men who are men and women who are officials who are supposed to be able to control and rate and understand what they had jurisdiction over couldn't define between an antelope and something in the Cervidae family. They began to chase his deer, the 19 fallow deer, which if you have a basic understanding of deer, you understand that in a situation like that, at high speed where you're chasing on a four-wheeler, it tends to put the animals in a flight mode where they run away. They become stressed, disoriented, nervous. And that was very obvious by the pansy of not only the deer, but the other animals on the property. The bison, the black buck antelope, a Watusi bull, they ran and stirred up those animals and made them so stressed to the point that it actually injured the Watusi bull to a point that he couldn't even lift down his back leg. The local veterinarian had a written response that it had caused him to be lame from the stress and unnecessary discomfort that this inhumane treatment had been put on the animal. Instead of shooting the animals and putting them out of their misery, they said that they were going to tranquilize and dart each animals and euthanize them. Again, if they were going to do that, they didn't even have a basic understanding of how much drugs to put in the dart gun and had to refer to Mr. Allman of how much drugs to use on his own animals that they were killing in front of him. In 6 hours all day, they only shot 7 head of deer. 7 head of deer. Something that if you had, again, a basic understanding, would only take a matter of hours to go ahead and get rid of all 19 head, but it took them 6 hours to shoot 7 deer. During this entire tragedy, Mr. Almond was held hostage in a similar situation as you heard before from these 5 people. They rampaged his house and his office looking for any documentation that they could find that he had transported, owned, seen, looked at, or any other mount than those 19 deer that were on his farm. They found a health paper. A health paper is written by a veterinarian that certifies that the animal written on the health paper is in good sound condition for shedits. And they questioned, well, what are these? These are sheep, these are deer, where are these at? When in fact, Shevet are a domestic breed of sheep. So then, after they had done all that, they wouldn't let him call anybody, wouldn't let him take pictures. He didn't get in contact with Senator Fletcher Hartzell's office, who tried their best to get in contact with the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. They put his office on hold for 40 minutes. When they did finally answer the phone, they told him that they were at Mr. Almond's house, helping him identify what species that were on his property. A man who had owned and worked deer and other exotic and domestic animals for the past 25 years, but they were there to help him clear up what species were on his property. After that 6 hours of agony, they finally gave up and told him that before his court date, that he was not going to be allowed to move any of his animals, any of the livestock on his property until after that court date. The following evening, Mr. Knight, one of the biologists who had came on that day to shoot and to terrorize him, came back to his house and showed up and asked him if he would unlock the gate to his field because he had left his gun next to a tree. The Wildlife Commission charged him with shooting animals in a high fence and charged him for not having that permit to own captive cervidae. A permit that was required for years before, but only recently they decided that they were going to try and enforce. Mr. Gerald Almond is only one example, as we've heard before, of the mistreatment, abuse, and agony that the North Carolina Wildlife Commission puts on individuals in the state of North Carolina. Constituents and people who care, people who have a passion for this industry, a passion for the sport, a passion for wildlife, for conservation. You heard from the individuals that have children who want a future in this. I go to NC State University with fishery and wildlife majors, biology majors who care, they have a passion. They want to put on a green suit one day and stand in front of you and to represent and to protect the species and the people who enjoy the same things they do. But it breaks my heart to share with them the things that I know, the truth behind what really happens. And myself having a passion for the industry and want to continue on what my family has done for the past 45 years. But it breaks my heart even more to know that that's not going to be a possibility unless something changes and someone stands up and does what's right. So again, I appreciate your willingness to come up here to the mountains and to listen to the voices of the people and to listen to what we have to say. And I really hope that there can be some change. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hager, I recognize you to ask a question.
Ms. Hampton, real quick before you get back to your seat. Did you, and I had a little trouble following, I apologize. Did you say that the 19 deer were shot or tranquilized?
So, to be humane, it would be easier to shoot them and put them out of misery. But instead, they chased them on 4-wheelers, shot them with a tranquilizing gun to dart them, which would cause them to be still, and then they would euthanize them.
Okay, so they basically,
Right, they're no longer there.
Did the Mr. Almond's warrant that he had, that was presented to him, did it say that they needed to look at the deer, catalog the deer, kill the deer, or what did it say?
Search and see, so just to be able to see them in front of their face, to look at them.
It
But
did
they
say-
overuse that power to search and kill.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Hampton? Any additional questions about any of the previous issues you heard from the
You know, I had no questions. Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Ms. Chris questions on Chris, that's okay, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chris, you stated that you had some of your property taken, your boats, your, I think skid steer, I believe. Who took those property? Who took the property?
Okay, my husband was arrested on a federal warrant, the state agents took our equipment.
Do you have any idea where it is now?
I have no idea, we have not got anything back in 22 months, because I previously stated, the equipment is used to operate our boat dock business, that's how we make our money, and we really have a hard time passing seasons trying to make things go.
So you don't know if the federal agency has it or the state agency or who has it?
I think the state has.
Okay, and he was convicted of what?
Okay, my husband was originally by the grand jury convicted of possessing illegal bear parts. Then they dropped that. That's not what he was charged with in court. He was charged with hunting over bait, and then another charge was physically digging ginseng on the park. They dropped that whenever our lawyer was about to question the jurisdiction issue, but he was given 90 days for hunting over bait, and he never got out of the boat.
Okay, so he was convicted of hunting with bait.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Stiles might
Stiles.
elaborate on that.
Placing a chocolate processed food product in the area congregate bear.
His property got seized because of that, is that correct? His boat, skid steer?
No, that was the result of, they were originally indicted, all these men were, by a grand jury, and once we started winning the federal jury trials summarily, the indictment charges were basically dismissed, and they were recharged with petty offenses, and so this was a resulting petty offense that came up against Mr. Chris probably a year and a half into this.
Is there any reason why Mr. Chris' property should have not been returned by now, or is there a reason about missing something here?
No, and that's like with Mr. Jenkins, he had, the other men, they came in and took fish that had been caught, I'm talking about 55, 60-year-old men that had caught one on 20. They took everything, living animal out of their house, turkey beards that were killed 15 years ago, they see. All the computers, or pickup trucks, all this stuff. The only one I've known to get back to Rock Parker stuff, and I don't know exactly where they're stored. I know Chad Arnold was the one that was in possession of, or in control of that. He produced the stuff back to my client, but they still got all the stuff. My understanding is either some of it may be in the Forest Service office in Murphy, and then some of it may be in Kelvin Franklin.
Can you provide this committee with a list of those things of your clients?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Last thing I have for Scott, I apologize for grilling you. I know you feel like you're on the witness stand. I apologize for taking the turn a little bit of what you're used to. How of your clients that you dealt with, can you give me an approximation about how much money these folks have spent trying to defend themselves?
I probably represented 12 people, and it's over $100,000.
Thank you.
And one thing I'd like to add, when y'all, Representative Dixon, when you get the proper documentation and stuff, subpoena the website video that North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission put out the day they went out and arrested all these folks. Because Colonel Dabney's on there talking about all the bear gallbladders that caught people selling, all the bear parts, all of these things on this website video that never panned out. We had a meeting in February back this year among local hunters over in Bryson City. The day we had that meeting, it hit YouTube. North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission pulled their complete website operation, something Bruin offline. I meant to have that thing copied by a computer expert. I didn't. I don't have it. If you'll get that, it'll show you exactly what they claimed they had found. And when you get the reports, it'll show you how much they've misled the public, misled everybody in this state. And what they didn't find was all the things that Dabney was on there saying happened, and it just didn't happen. That'll show you the disproof right there. If you can get that, the website video.
Chairman, I have one more question, one last question. Mr. Smith? Yes. You had stuff seized from you, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
You received, got
I've got everything back except the SD card and my catfish bait.
catfish bait probably bad by now.
I'd say it is, but it took us a while. The judge, we went to court, like I was arrested in February, went to court March the 19th, if I'm in that area, somewhere around March 19th, 2013. On that day, the items that were seized were not on the items to be seized list. The judge had ordered that the state return my stuff. It took us about 8 weeks, 9 weeks to get it back. And the judge ordered it to immediate release back to us because it wasn't on the items to be seized list. We got everything back except for the catfish.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Further discussion, further debate from members of the committee? I'd like to thank Ms. Linda Johnson. Yes, sir.
I'd like to just say one thing I did. They came to my daughter's house and searched with an illegal search warrant. She lived on the reservation. They had a state search warrant. They come in and took all her stuff. They looked for my son, but he lives half a mile on the road. And they wouldn't let her in her house. They just ransacked and took everything in. It was the wrong house. And they do have all the stuff that they took my place down there still.
You talk about on federal tribal lands.
Yes, on tribal lands, they searched it with the state search. And the tribal police told them they didn't have jurisdiction, they went ahead and done it anyway. And they've got all my stuff that they take from Georgia, so they've got nothing back.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Further discussion, further debate from members of the committee. I'd like to recognize Linda Johnson, the committee clerk, did an excellent job helping us all put this together and make sure we're all taken care of. Don't get lost up here on our way up here. So, with that, the committee's adjourned, and thank you for your time.